Hello, my name is Steve Russell. It is April 6th, 2025, and we are located at the Randell Research Center in Bokeelia, Florida, which is on Pine Island. The Randell Research Center is a program of the Florida Museum of Natural History. Today I will be recording a tour being given by Kevin Lollar, who is a tour guide here at Randell. The tour will cover in part the Calusa people who lived and thrived here where we are standing for many hundreds of years.
I mean, I know something, but you never know if it's correct or anything.
Alrighty, somewhere along 1000 AD, the Calusa had been here for 500 years. They've been building mounds for a couple hundred years. And they decided, well, let's dig a canal across the island. All right? And so why would you want to do that? They dug it from here at Pine Island Sound across to Matlacha Pass, 2.5 miles. Why? Well, to get to the other side, obviously. But why would you want to go over there? Remember, these people are traders, and they got tribute coming in. The main drag in Florida, the Alligator Alley would have been Caloosahatchee River. So people coming down here from the other part of the state, coming up to here, or these guys going up the river, cut a canal in there, that's gonna cut 10 miles off your trip. And you guys are all paddlers. If you can cut off 10 miles, that's a good thing. And the same thing around that way too. And another thing is the prevailing winds around here, as you probably all know, are from the northeast. Which is fine, because if you live on this side of the island, you're in the lee. But, as you all also know, from time to time we get winds you can't be paddling around in, okay? Before a front gets here, the wind switches around out of the south for a day or two. And it can blow 15, 20, 25 knots. And then when the front gets here, it'll blow 15, 25, 30, maybe even 40 knots. Maybe 2 or 3 days. And you can't go out and fish in that. Well, you gotta feed the people, so what do? Well, you could get in the canal and go over here and fish this area and be in the lee. So that's another purpose for this thing. This is what's left of the canal. When Cushing was here, it was pretty much intact, but it just kind of got filled in over the years. 2 archaeologists, George Lure and Ryan Wheeler, did this really great work on this. They surveyed the whole thing all the way across the island, and they determined that it was 18 to 28 feet wide, depending on where you were, and 3 to 5 feet deep, depending on where you were on the canal. The scientists took those numbers and did some math and decided if you took all the dirt that the Calusa dug out of this thing to make the canal, and you stacked it up on a football field, and you squared it off nice and neat, it would be a stack of dirt 300 feet by 150 feet by 25 feet. It's a lot of dirt you're digging out, okay? But not only that, they had to clear the land. This would have been a slash pine forest. This is Pine Island, right? So slash pine out there, slash pine, palmettos, gumbo limbos, cabbage trees. They had to cut all that stuff down to make this path. And then they had to pull the stumps up. This was hard work. These guys really had to work hard to do it. But the labor involved is not the most impressive thing. The impressive thing is the engineering. Because Pine Island is not flat, right? It's sea level here and over here in Matlacha Pass. But right down the middle, there's a ridge, 12 feet. Okay? That's where you go when the hurricanes are coming. We evacuated from my house right down here to the middle of the island, and my house got 2 feet of water, got nothing up there. Okay, it's higher. And so what are you gonna do? You can't cut through that. The Calusa did what we do. Remember, the Calusa are like us. They looked at this problem and they did the math. They surveyed it, said, we got it figured out. This is how you do it. Sea level, 12 feet. But it's not nice rise like that and a nice bell curve like that to the other side. What you have is right here, you start at sea level, it goes 300 yards flat. and then you get a little rise. And it goes 400 yards, and another rise, 600 yards, all the way across to the top of the island, and then it goes like that. It's like steps. What the Calusa did, this is where the smarts come in. We don't know where they started. They might have started in the middle, but I'm going to say they started right here, just to make it easy. They start right here, and they dig down below the mean low water mark, so water's going to be coming in, you know, even at low tides. And they dig, they get to this first rise, and they put a control structure. And the water comes in, it stops right there. And then they dig this section, 400 yards, okay? And they get to the next rise, and they put a structure there. But wait a minute. Every plumber will tell you two things: payday's on Friday, and water doesn't go uphill, right? This water from Pine Island Sound is not going to be up in here. Where'd this water come from? This is where the Calusa got smart. Florida's a wet place. You start digging a hole, you're going to get water pretty quick, okay? The Calusa realized if we dig down far enough, we're going to hit something hard. We call it the hard pan. And it can be clay, or it can be compacted organic material that water does not seep down through. Hydrologically, term is aquiclude. It's an aquiclude. So what they did is they dug down to the hard pan in each section. The water comes in from the side, and that's what fills this up. That's pretty smart. Okay. And of course, it's going to take maintenance. Got to be maintained. And you know, the artists put these logs in here. We think that might have been what they did, and they might have put logs all along in there to help to keep it from caving in. But this was a pretty brilliant thing. Also, when Cushing was here, this berm was still here. What this was for, and again, being smart, here in Florida we have what's known as sheet flow. Sheet flow is when you get a lot of rain in the summertime and the water won't take anymore, so it just stacks up and then it just flows down to the water down here. You don't want that happening and rolling over here to erode the sides of your canal, so they put this berm there. Okay. And another thing that they did, okay, remember these water features? Okay, if you look at these, you notice something. Coming off the canal, each one has what we call lateral canals that had gates on them. What would happen is, in the summertime, you get all this rain coming in here. If you guys have been here in the summer, you get tons of rain in the afternoon. That water's gonna come roaring down here and tear up the sides of your canal. But what they did the same thing on the other side as well. You get all this water coming down, they open the gates, goes in there and fills up these water features. Slows the water down. Plus it fills up the water features so you'll actually have water in there. Smart guys. The first person to ever write about this canal was a guy named Charles Kenworthy. He's a physician from New York. And he roamed around Florida writing stories for outdoor magazines. And he had a very interesting pen name. He called himself Al Fresco. Get it? But he got out here and he writes about this canal. And he says, man, this is a brilliant thing. It's an engineering masterpiece. But he said, the Calusa didn't do it. Because, he said, the Calusa were too indolent, too lazy. Why did he say that? Because that's what the Spanish said. The Spanish came back, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Spanish come back here, and they write about the Calusa, calling them indios indolentes, lazy Indians, because they weren't farmers. All these guys want to do is fish. That ain't working. No, you got to farm the land. If you don't farm, you're lazy. That's why Kenworthy called the Calusa indolent. He also said that the Calusa didn't do this because the engineering required a higher degree of intellect than the Calusa had. Now, if that is not a Eurocentric attitude, Charles Blanchard, the guy who called me back in 1992, had this expression, the dumb Indian attitude. We get this feeling, oh, these are just dumb Indians. You know, what do they know? They pile some shells up and make a mound, but they're stupid. No, these were smart people. They survived here for 1,200 years. They did all right, okay? So, that's the canal. Here is another thing that we can do or not. If we wanted to, we could walk around there and up on Randell Mound for the best view in South Florida, or we can go back that way and we can finish up there. Yep. Okay, yep, all righty. Enthusiastic.
What is that over there?
Well,
That
yeah.
area.
That's Upper Captiva.
Oh.
North Cap.
He said there's 3 babies in there. Oh, really? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that nest right up there. Okay, to close out our story today, we're going to talk about Calusa politics and Calusa religion. Okay, politics and religion are why there are no Calusa at all. Remember, the Spanish didn't come back for 45 years after the Calusa killed Juan Ponce de Leon. And when they did, they were led by Pedro Menendez de Avilés. He was the adelantado, the governor, military governor of Florida. He shows up in 1566 at Mound Key, Calos, the capital, and he tells the cacique, whose name was also Calos, he wants to build a fort and a mission at the capital. He wants to convert all the Calusa to Christianity. So they've gone beyond the point of simply murdering indigenous people to trying to convert them. So Calos says, sure, why not? Now this is a strange thing because the Calusa hate the Spanish. But Calos was thinking, I can use these Spanish with their really advanced weapons in the ongoing wars they were having with the Tocobaga, who lived north of Tampa Bay, the other Tampa Bay. So the Spanish build a fort, they build a mission, they start trying to convert the Calusa, and Calos says, okay, now let's go kill all the Tocobaga. And Menendez says, no, we're not going to do that. I didn't come here to fight wars. In fact, I want you to make peace with the Tocobaga. That made Calos mad. You fight the Tocobaga. That's what the Calusa do. That's part of their tradition. You don't tell them not to fight these people. That's what we do. It's like Florida and Florida State. You can't tell them not to do it. So Calos started plotting to kill all the Spaniards. Unfortunately for Calos, there's another high-ranking Calusa. The Spanish called him Don Felipe. He wanted to be the cacique. He told Menendez that if you kill Calos and his 2 top aides, and make me cacique, I'll become a Christian. I'll make sure everybody else becomes a Christian. Menendez, sure, that's a great deal. Kill these guys, everybody becomes Christian, doing our jobs. So Menendez invites Calos and his 2 top people into the fort, and they chop their heads off. They make Don Felipe the cacique, and Don Felipe turns around and does not become a Christian. All right? This is another way that the Calusa are like us, politically. This is a campaign promise. That's all it was. You make me cacique, I'll do this. Had no intention to do it. So, a lot of things happened over the next year and a half, and I won't get into them, but Menendez just gets tired of Don Felipe not becoming a Christian, so they kill him. That made all the Calusa mad on Mound Key down at Calos, so they burned down all their houses, and they just left. They got in their canoes, they paddled away, some of them probably came down here, and Spanish were left there with nothing to do, nobody to convert, so they went back to Cuba. And then the Calusa came back to Mound Key, and they just lived happily ever after for the next 128 years when the next bunch of Spanish showed up. But when they got back to Cuba, the head priest, Juan Rojel, wrote all this stuff up, and he told us about the Calusa religion. And this is important. Okay. The Calusa have 3 gods. You had universal God, guy who makes the sun go up and sun go down, tides go in, tides go out. You had a kind of vague political God, the God of empires, then you have a war God. Also, each Calusa has 3 souls. One soul is in the pupil of your eye, one soul is in your shadow, and one soul is in your reflection in a calm body of water. When a Calusa dies, the eye soul stays with the body and is buried. The other 2 souls leave the body and they enter a large animal. When that animal dies, the soul goes into a smaller animal, and then a smaller animal and a smaller animal. That's their religion. That's the religion they want. Juan Rogel, the priest, said that they had believed in their religion from the beginning of time. And he wrote, they did not want to listen to me. They just wanted to be left alone. That's all the Calusa wanted, is to be left alone so they could fish out here and get by and eat papayas and trade for things. The Calusa wanted nothing to do with Spanish religion or anything else. And they also didn't want anybody else to. Okay? The Calusa practiced what John Worth calls, he's an archaeologist, calls resistance and isolationism. Just keep them away. Keep them out of all of South Florida. And in fact, in 1567, the Calusa heard that people down in the Keys called the Tetesta were trading with the Spanish. So a bunch of them, we don't know how many, got in canoes and paddled all the way to the Keys. Think about that. You're a paddler. Paddled to the Keys, and they assassinated the cacique of the Tetesta. And they said, don't trade with these people. Then in 1614, the Calusa heard that people up around Tampa Bay, the other Tampa Bay called the Mocoso, they were trading with the Spanish. This time, a fleet of 300 canoes. And we don't know how many people were each canoe, but maybe sent maybe 1,000 people up there, 1,000 warriors. They attacked 2 Mocoso settlements and they killed 500 people just for trading with the Spanish. The ones they left alive, they told to walk from Tampa Bay to St. Augustine, the Spanish capital of Florida. Tell the Spanish governor of Florida, the Calusa did this. Stay away, all right? So this is the way it was. We just don't want these guys around. The next people to show up were priests in 1697. And again, they just showed up. We got to convert these people. We can't leave them alone. And this time, though, they brought farm tools. Remember, these are indios indolentes, lazy Indians. We got to teach them to till the land. This is what the priest said. We must teach them to till the land and make them rational people. So they bring these farm tools, and the Calusa look at them. By this time, the Calusa had heard through the trading network about the African slave trading up in the colonies, and they could still speak Spanish. So they looked at these tools, and they said to the Spanish, that's great. Where's the slaves to use them? What they were saying is, we don't make a living digging in the dirt. We make a living catching fish out here in these estuaries, so just back off. So these priests, after about 2 months, the Calusa just threw these guys out. Just get out of here, okay? So this isolationism is a very important thing. And I'm getting into one little kind of gray area because you're going to read a lot of places, including academic books and articles, that by 1600, the Calusa population had crashed from 20,000 to 2,000, 90%, due to European diseases.
Right.
Okay, right. But there's another school that I'm in that says, no, because this isolationism kept them from getting the diseases as bad as all these other indigenous people. Okay? So they were still a powerful, robust population up until the 1700s. Right? Whichever school you're in, we do know that the beginning of the end for the Calusa was 1704. Okay. The English, the British, had taken the control of North Florida away from the Spanish, and to do that, they enlisted the aid of Creek and Yamasee Indians from Georgia and South Carolina. They gave them muskets to fight this war. When the war was over, now we're in charge of North Florida, they said to the Creeks and Yamasees, take your muskets, go on down to South Florida and start rounding up Indians. We need slaves. Got to have slaves for the colonies. So over the next 7 years, the Creeks and Yamasees took back an estimated 10,000 South Florida Indians. That's Calusa, Ayas, Miamis, everybody. Right? And that doesn't count how many they killed, because you know that Creeks and Yamasee show up here and say, hey, come on, let's go to Georgia. Want you to be slaves. The Calusa are going to fight them. But these guys got muskets. You've heard the expression, you know, never take a knife to a gunfight. That's what these people did. They had bows and arrows. These other guys had muskets. So the raids got so bad that everybody in South Florida moved to the Keys. The Calusa abandoned Tampa, our Tampa, in 1710. And you got to wonder about the psychological effect. These people have been here forever. You know, we talk, people around here, well, I'm a fourth generation Floridian. I'm not, but people, you know, people like the Darnas and the Dooleys, you know, fourth generation. Yeah, that's like 100 years. The Calusa were here for 1,200 years, 40 generations. That's all they knew. And they had to pack up and go to the Keys because of the Creeks and Yamasees. So everybody's down in the Keys. Big irony, then, is the Calusa, with their indomitable spirit, they didn't want to, you know, mess with the Spanish. They didn't want to become Christians. If they had buddied up with the Spanish, if they had traded with the Spanish, they could have gotten guns themselves. And for 100 years, the Spanish had a string of forts in North Florida, and they converted those Indians. And they protected those Indians from people like the Creeks and Yamasees. If the Calusa had simply converted and become, you know, mission Indians, the way the North Indians were, the Spanish might have still been here. They could build a fort right here. And the Creeks and Yamasees come down, no, you're not going to take us. We got guns, we got a fort, we got Spanish to help us. And another really big irony is, you remember how the Taino left Cuba and came to Florida to get away from the evil Spanish? 1711, all these people down in the Keys, these South Florida Indians, asked the Spanish to take them to Cuba to get away from evil Creek and Yamasee Indians. So in 1711, 270 South Florida Indians, including 50 Calusa, including the cacique and his son, got on 2 ships. They went to Cuba, where within 3 months, 200 of them had died from the diseases they didn't get up here. Which is one reason I'm thinking, you know, they didn't get wiped out by disease up here because they died when they went down there, all right? But there were still Calusa up here. In 1743, more priests come up. We've got to convert these people. They find a bunch of Calusa at the mouth of the Miami River. And these are no longer these great race of giants, ripped people. They become kind of drunks, right? The head priest, a guy named Alenia, said that they had this incredible passion for rum. The first thing that the Calusa said when the priests got there was, did you bring rum? And the priest said, no, we didn't bring rum. Rum is evil, rum is bad for you. And he said that they had the audacity to say to us, you use wine in your ceremonies, give us rum, and we'll use that in our ceremonies. And we said, you're not getting any rum? They said, then we're not being Christian. That's it. Alenia writes that the Calusa men would drink rum until they burst. Not sure what that means, but it's unpleasant sounding. He also writes that the head Calusa priest would drink rum many times until he passes out. And what we think is what he's doing, he's the holy man and he's drinking rum, trying to get inspiration, trying to get visions, to answer the question, this big question, what happened to us? You know? Then, these priests, you know, they're just, you tell by the way Alenia writes that they think that the Calusa are just some kind of really lower life people. And Alenia writes with just tremendous disgust about seeing a group of Calusa praying to a carved wooden fish. And I think this is neat, because after all they've been through, all right, the raids and being separated from their family, having to leave their homes, and also this is the first time, Alenia is writing for the first time about Calusa getting smallpox, getting diseases. So now they're getting diseases. After all of this, they still got their own religion. That's pretty neat. Alenia didn't think it was pretty neat. He thought it was idolatry. And he wrote, and this is from Hans' translation, he writes, their idolatries will be abolished, and the true religion established in this people, despite the obstinate ones who, through punishment, shall come to understand those things they could not grasp through reason. In other words, if we can't talk them into being Christians, we're going to beat it into them. But he ultimately says, I can't do anything with these people. I cannot change them. They are indomitable. They're ferocious. They're warlike. You know, I can't do anything with them. So they leave. But then 20 years later in 1763, the last known 80 Calusa families, we don't know how many that is, maybe a couple hundred people, got on 2 ships and went to Cuba. Okay? And that is when the Calusa just disappeared from the historical record. We don't know what happened to those people. They might have gone down there and all died from diseases just like that. Or there might be DNA down there. They might have married in with other groups down there. They might have married in, I can imagine this, some of the Spanish might have come down, you know, they would talk about how attractive the women were, so the Spanish might come down and say, hey, you know, beautiful Calusa woman, you want to come live in the big house? So there might be DNA down there. There might be DNA, Calusa DNA, up here in Florida, because it's pretty much consensus that not all of the Calusa left and went to Cuba. You know, there's a lot of going back and forth, and people bringing back, so like, don't go down there, it's not healthy. People are dying. So some of these Calusa probably stayed here, just kind of melted into the countryside. And then when the Seminole come down in the late 18th century, the Calusa say, welcome to South Florida. Can we marry in with you? We'll teach you how to fish. And so DNA there. The Seminoles actually have an old saying. If you see a tall Seminole, it's probably a Calusa. But the culture itself, there's no one single Calusa left. The whole culture is gone. This great, you know, artistic warrior fishing culture is completely gone. Chuck Blanchard, the archaeologist who called me back in 1992, wrote a book called New Words, Old Songs. It's all about the rise, decline, and fall of the Calusa. And the last sentence of that book sums up what we're talking about right here. Blanchard writes, the last of the traditional Calusa appear to have ended their lives as fugitives, slaves, or displaced persons, dying in many cases without nation or tribe or family, their hearts embittered, their minds befuddled by rum and unspeakable loneliness. That's it. They're gone. 250 years after first contact, the Calusa were completely gone. They were victims of other indigenous people. They were victims, to one degree or another, of disease. They were victims of rum. But as much as anything, they were victims of their own indomitable spirit and their refusal to abandon their liberty to the discretion and foreign will of other men, all right? But that might not be the end. Okay, remember, 2 Calusa souls leave the body, enter a large animal, and then a smaller animal, okay? Could be that the souls of some Calusa who were born here at Tampa, lived here and died here, have worked their way down, and they're ospreys, or bald eagles, or pelicans, and they're still making a living catching the fish out here in Pine Island Sound. Okay? That's it.
There's one right there.
There you go.
Thank you.
See?
Ah, that's awesome.
You don't want to feed the baby. She's
That's
been
awesome.
sitting
There you go.
sitting there. That's why
You
we've been
couldn't have
screaming.
timed that any better.
I planned it. That's my buddy.
You got the memo.
I got the memo. So that's it. Any questions? Thanks for coming out, y'all. Yes?
So, do they have the Calusa DNA?
No.
That's
We don't have any DNA. We found some bones, but the DNA is so degraded.
Yeah.
The soil that they found it in is just, you know, it just eats up the DNA, so we just don't have anything to go by. Plus, you know, you might be able to find some in the burial mounds, but you don't dig in burial mounds anymore. It's just not done. Okay. So, anything else? Okay.
What's across? What's the city that we see or whatever?
That's North Cap, Upper Captiva.
Yeah. And then is that like just a mangrove?
You got mangroves. You got this is Black Island. That's Wood Key. That's Rat Key over there. Rat Key is an actual mound, or you know, made by the Calusa. And if you go around there, it's Part Island. That's also a Calusa site. There's a whole bunch of Calusa sites out here that the Calusa just like, hey, let's build an island right here, and that's what they did. So there have been a Calusa all over this place, not just here. And it must have been just, to me, you know, think about all these islands. Not all of them, but a lot of these islands were Calusa settlements. And so you're here, you get done your day fishing, and you're up here on your mound, and you can see, you know, cooking fires, other mounds, other islands out there. And say, okay, I need to go talk to Joe. I traded him some stuff, and I haven't gotten You know, I traded him a bunch of mullet last week, but he's going to give me some shark's teeth. But you know, I need to go talk to him about that. You know, so anyway, alrighty. Well, we'll go back down that way, and you guys can go have some lunch.
I find it ironic that a group of men that require slaves to survive